that time in New York, it was a very, very bad position to have. It still is, I guess, and it helped beat me in my last election, which I lost by 3.5 points, and they say that 8 points I lost because of the death penalty, because it was a particularly tough situation. But anyway, I was in terrible shape. Got to be October 29th. They were running commercials on the death penalty over and over and over again. And you could see your polls go down. They would report to you every night. You're down 5 points, you're down 6 points. Why? What did I do? How did I change from yesterday? You know, I beat Koch. What are they? Well, it's the television, and you don't have television. So it got to be October 29th, 1982. And I came home one night, maybe 2 o'clock in the morning after a long day campaigning, and I said, man, this is terrible. And you start feeling sorry for yourself. You know, it's all money, and you know, I came this far, and what a shame, and now it looks like I'm going to lose, and you feel like giving up. And in that mood, I was keeping a diary all the time, all through the campaign, just to keep myself on track. And I decided to go up and just write in my diary to bring the diary up to date on where I was in the campaign. And I opened the drawer looking for paper and stuff and came upon a card, a business card. It was a business card. I kept it in the drawer. It was one of the only business cards Papa ever had. And he couldn't read it. But we bought him business cards because we thought he would like it. And the business card said, Andrea Cuomo, Italian-American, fine imported Italian-American foods. And he loved it, boy. We read it to him. He loved the card. And Mama put it on a velvet background in a little gold frame, you know, and they had it next to their bed. They had it right there on an end table next to the bed. Andrea Cuomo, Italian. Long after he died, Mama kept that card there. And it meant everything to Papa, and that got me thinking about Papa. And I said to myself, gee, I wonder how Papa would have reacted to this campaign. If he were in my position, how would he feel? Would Papa be as discouraged as I am? And I thought about that. I said, gee, Willikers, of course he wouldn't. Look at what he faced. I mean, Papa was a little guy, a really little guy, maybe 5'6". He had bad eyes. He had a bad hip from an accident in Italy when he was a child. He walked with a limp. He only weighed about 150 pounds. I don't know how he handled the shovel and the wheelbarrow when he was doing that work. You know, he's a beautiful man, and he had a tremendous heart and a great will and a wonderful disposition. But he wasn't gifted physically. He wasn't gifted in any way. He came here, the depression, my God, what must it have been with 3 children and no work and no social program and no friends, and so grateful just to live under a roof in a back room, even living like the gypsies of the old neighborhood who used to live in storefronts, and to be grateful for that, discouraged. And then to face all the problems that he faced in that grocery store, one after the other. We almost went bankrupt 2 or 3 times. He had a heart attack. I said, and I was embarrassed. And then I remembered the spruce tree. What had happened is, after many years, it seemed, in the store, after many, many years, Papa had only one dream. He had never lived in his own house. And he wanted, before he died, for us to have our own house. And the definition of your own house to him was, there's a door you go in the front, and there's a door you go out the back. And that means it's yours. It's not the tenements, where there are stores on the front, on the bottom floor level, and then 2, 3, 4, depending on the tenement, levels of apartment above you. And he says, we're going to have a house. We're going to have a nice house with a little bit of ground, because you got to have a little ground where you're going to grow tomatoes. And you know, you have to have a little vegetable garden. You've got to have something like that. And many years later, Papa was able to surprise Mama. And that's the way, you couldn't get away with, I couldn't get away with this, but Papa could in the old days. He bought a house without telling Mama and without telling the kids. Because he knew exactly what he wanted, and he found it in a place called Holliswood, Queens, which was maybe 10 minutes by car from South Jamaica. And it was just a little place, but it had land around it, and it had this fantastic blue spruce tree, a beautiful blue spruce. Now, you've all seen blue spruces. And this one was really a beauty, and it stood so straight with its nose, you know, pointing straight up to heaven. And Papa took us to see that house and took us to see the Blue Spruce, and I was just a young fella, and he said, man, he says, this is all ours. And Mama looked for a place to put her garden, you know, and she didn't fuss about how many rooms, how many, forget about it. It's our house, it's all ours. What's the difference what it's like inside? And it wasn't much of a house. It was a modest little place. It didn't have a lot of room in it. As a matter of fact, it was occupied by just a couple before we took it, and we had the 3 kids living in it, and Mama and Papa. But it was a palace as far as we were concerned. And that Blue Spruce, boy, it summed it all up. And then one day, coming home from the store, there was a terrible storm. And when we got to the house, we saw the Blue Spruce uprooted. And the Blue Spruce was, as I described it later in my diary, with its nose, you know, we were on a piece of property that was on a kind of rounded corner, and our property was actually maybe 4 or 5 feet above the street level. And the tree had toppled over, its roots came out of the ground, and its nose was bent in the asphalt of the street. And we saw that. My brother was with us at the time, my older brother and myself and Papa. And my brother and I says, oh man, that tree's gone. Because we didn't know anything about trees. We were heartbroken. And Papa looked at that tree and looking, and the rain was coming down and the wind was blowing. He says, don't worry, we're going to push him up. And my brother said, Pa, it's gone. He says, shut up, but we're going to push him up. And you couldn't, you couldn't argue with him, not because you thought he was right, but because it meant so much to him. You could see it. You could see it in his face. And he went downstairs in the basement, and he came up with rope, and he came up with a shovel, and he says, okay, and here's what we're going to do. You're going to be up there, Frankie. You're going to pull. We're going to push him. And we pulled and pushed, and the rain was coming down, and when we got it reasonably straight, you know, the roots were all there, but we needed to make room for the roots to go back to their resting place. So Papa with the shovel was digging around and making the space again, and the roots, you know, he was pushing the roots down into the ground and then shoveling the mud over the roots, and they staked the thing and tied it with ropes, and maybe it seemed like 10 hours later, but maybe it was an hour later, I don't know. This thing was all straightened up, still in the rain. The roots had sunk down a little bit into the mud. Boulders, he pushed boulders over the roots, and he said, don't worry. He looked at it, he's going to go again. It's going to grow again. And Frankie and I, we weren't sure what would happen. We were exhausted, and we were glad that he got it up again. At least he had the consolation of seeing it up off the canvas, back on its feet. But grow again, you know, we didn't think it would. I said in the diary entry I made that day, if you go back now, because this had happened years before 1982, I said, you can see that same Blue Spruce, maybe 20 feet taller than it was then, with its nose still pointed up at the heavens, pretending it had never been bent in the asphalt of the street. And with that story, a true story which actually happened, you know, there, early in the morning, now it had to be like 4 o'clock in the morning, I took Papa's card, I put it back in the drawer, I slammed that drawer shut. I said, I can't wait to get back into this campaign, because it revitalized me. It revitalized me by shaming me, by making me ashamed of myself, that with all I had, with all the blessings, with all the good luck, with all the physical strength, with 5 beautiful kids, with money, with everything else, I was complaining that, you know, I might lose an election. When he kissed Kessler's hand for giving him a room behind a store. And I said, man, and I won.